women's travel patterns differ fundamentally from the way men travel.
Was it something of surprise? Was it something that you expected?
You have more women who are able to participate in the workforce. You have more women who are able to access educational opportunities. You have more women who are able to contribute to their household savings because they work more regularly, save more regularly. Households are becoming more resilient. So, my name is Ria Karan. I represent Purpose. And along with Asar, we both co anchor the Sustainable Mobility Network, or SMN. SMN is a coalition of over 20 organizations that works across five major cities in India. We work in Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, Kolkata, and Mumbai. And what we're trying to do is ensure that mobility is made clean, it's made accessible, and it's made inclusive to all. In terms of the organizations, we're a bunch of researchers, we're think tanks, we're community based organizations. And since 2021, what we've championed is the triple zero approach, which is zero emissions, zero exclusions, and zero road deaths. In terms of how we came about this study, what we've seen is in the past few years, several states have rolled out a bus fare subsidy for women, right? You have, to name a few, Delhi, Karnataka, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh. And there's often a lot of debate, both from government, from opposition, from CSOs in this space, of the true effectiveness of the scheme. We have several organizations that have conducted some studies in several different states as to its effectiveness. But what we were really missing was a comparative analysis of what has worked and what has not worked in these states. So, what we set out to do was design something that can look at states that have a full subsidy for women, states that have a partial subsidy for women, and states that have no subsidy, and do a comparative analysis across these three buckets and see how this scheme has sort of shaped women's daily lives, shaped their access to opportunities, shaped just their freedom of movement. So that's what we set out to do with this study.
Before we get into the findings itself, I think it would be really nice to understand what you found about the importance or the place of bus and bus travel for women across these cities.
Yeah. So I think what is important to understand is that women's travel patterns differ fundamentally from the way men travel. And our study unearthed just that. So women actually take multiple trips a day as compared to men. What we see is they travel for work, sometimes it's to multiple workplaces. They travel to drop off their kids at school. They travel for mobility of healthcare. They travel to buy groceries. So they take many trips a day, and that's how it's very different to how men travel, which may be just to work and back. Um, what we also saw is women actually use the bus more than men. And this is often because of a few things. It could be because the bus is more affordable. It could be because the bus is more accessible. It's more reliable in terms of timings. So, to juggle all of these trips, it just serves as a more practical option. So, what we saw is irrespective of subsidy status, whether it's full subsidy, partial subsidy, no subsidy, over 70% of women across these cities continue to use buses in some way or the other.
That's really useful context, I think. And one of the key things that the study seems to have found is that there is significant savings that women make when they use buses, especially, of course, in the cities with subsidies. So can you talk a little bit about that finding, and
Sure.
was it something of surprise? Was it something that you expected?
We definitely expected some level of savings, but We weren't really sure to what extent that would be. In fact, what we saw is that women are often able to save up to 50% of their transport costs, and they're also able to redirect this to many more meaningful ways. I think a couple of things that I want to call out that came up repeatedly is, of course, they're able to direct it towards savings. They're able to direct it towards household essentials, towards healthcare, and towards their children's education. So, for example, in Delhi and Hubli, what we saw is that they're able to buy, medicines. They're able to afford school fees. We had a woman in Pune who told us that for the first time now that there's a partial subsidy introduced in Maharashtra, she's actually able to finally afford her children's textbooks on her salary. And this is huge, right? Because you're not just impacting the women's lives, you're having an impact on household resilience, your children's education. So that's how we need to look at the benefits. It's not merely savings, but it unlocks something for the whole household. However, at this stage, I'd just like to point out that while savings are continue to be high, so do first mile and last mile access costs. And this sometimes stands as a barrier in the way to accessing the full benefit of these schemes and the savings that come out of it. But however, the transformative impacts of the scheme cannot be ignored on how women are able to save.
Right. I think there was a study from Chennai last year, the CAG had done,
Yes.
where they also found the same thing. It seems that when women make these savings, they tend to pour it back into their families rather than say spend it on themselves, as the common perception might be.
Exactly. It's very much a household outcome that we need to be looking at.
Not that it would be wrong to spend it on
No,
themselves.
it wouldn't at all. And that's what we found. They're able to take trips for leisure as well, a lot more, whether it's intercity, intracity. They're able to have that freedom to take these leisure trips as well.
Right. Was there also were there women, young women reporting similar things with education? They were able to travel further.
Yeah, lots of women were able to cut out either their walking commute or, long distance commutes on by auto or shared rides and things like that, because they were able to say yes to the courses that they had previously declined due to the bus subsidy. So, lot of educational opportunities as well were unlocked.
So one of the things, of course, is that the gains vary across cities, and obviously this has a lot to do with the type of subsidy, probably, but also situation with the bus condition itself. Can you get into this a little bit? What did you find across cities?
So, yeah, I think you put it well that the gains don't simply rely on just the inclusion of the scheme. That's sort of a very first step. It needs to be supplemented with effective implementation of the bus scheme. So this is things like route rationalization, fleet sizes, the frequency of buses, the reliability of buses. All of this plays a role into how these schemes can be leveraged and how they can be accessed. For example, what we've seen is that in Bangalore, the BMTC is actually the second largest fleet holding in the country after Delhi. And there, the ratio of commuters to buses is in a much better state than, say, other major cities. For example, in Mumbai, during peak hour, ticket shortage is a very real, it's a very real problem. So what we saw is cities like Bangalore and Hubli show up to 5 times the employment gains that uh, cities that do not necessarily have as efficient and as robust systems are. In Delhi, where we do have the full subsidy available for women to access, um, overcrowding and safety concerns continue to be a problem which stand in the way of realizing the full potential of the gains of the scheme. So it's not just the scheme in itself that needs to be introduced. This needs to be coupled with adequate fleet sizes, good service quality, and safe infrastructure.
Right. In the cities without any subsidy, did you find that that bus travel itself was still very important to women?
Yes, we did. We still had across whether cities had a partial subsidy, had a full subsidy, had no subsidies. We were seeing over 70% of women across all cities still reporting that they use the bus. They depend very highly on it for their daily travels because they have to juggle these multiple tasks. Walking is simply too exhausting if you have to get to multiple locations. And uh, Mobility options like metros, autos prove to be too expensive for women. So even in subsidies that do not have the cost, I mean, do not have in cities that do not have the subsidy, women continue to use bus schemes. And in fact, when asked in cities that do have the subsidies, if the subsidy is removed, will you continue to use the bus? Majority of women still said yes. So that just shows how heavily dependent women are on the bus system and how it really forms the backbone of their mobility options.
Okay. That really shows that women are not just suddenly traveling because free buses
Exactly.
have been offered or something like that.
Not at all.
Right. So I think that that's a good segue to talk about some of the common myths. We discussed this before at the start of this call also, that there is a certain negative perception of subsidies itself. One, that it's wasteful and it's costing the taxpayer and it's costing the public money, and that women are misusing um, these schemes essentially. So, what did you find when you looked into some of these myths and when you talked to men, particularly about these?
Yeah, so there's definitely been, unfortunately, a lot of backlash that has come out of the introduction of the scheme. There are people who are labeling it as merely a freebie. There's lots of hostility from male co-passengers. Um, there are actually bus staff who have flat out refused to even issue a ticket to some of these women. And this is all caused by that underlying belief that it is a drain on economic resources.
Mm.
Um, but what we've seen is that these schemes actually generate positive economic returns. So they need to be viewed as not a drain, but an investment. You have more women who are able to participate in the workforce. You have more women who are able to access educational opportunities. You have more women who are able to contribute to their household savings because they work more regularly, save more regularly. Households are becoming more resilient, and women's participation in the economy rises. So, number one is that it's not merely an investment and it's not merely a drain to the economy, but rather it is an investment. That's one thing. Number two is there's this notion that because of the subsidy, as you mentioned, because of the subsidy, now women are flocking to the bus, and now it's created an unnecessary demand that wasn't there previously. But rather, what we are seeing is it's actually making the demand that was always there, it's making that demand visible, right? Women had previously been cutting back on the way they're using the bus. They had been walking sometimes and often long distances. They had been declining certain opportunities that they would have otherwise accessed. But now that the subsidy has been introduced, they're able to take that job, they're able to go to their healthcare visits. So, what it's done is not created unnecessary demand, it's unlocked suppressed demand. And that's very important in the way that we view it. Um, and what this needs to be coupled with is fleet expansion to ensure that this demand is met. It's not a question of too many riders, it's a question of too few buses. So, whenever a policy like this is rolled out, we need to ensure that service expansion goes hand in hand.
Do you also notice that there is an issue with messaging in these? with these with these schemes across cities? Like, is there enough effort by different bus services to explain or to kind of communicate this in a positive way?
Yeah, there's definitely a messaging gap. In fact, even the way men perceive how this scheme is used, for example, in Delhi, I think about 75% of women in Delhi reported financial savings from the scheme. But when we asked men the same question, only 50% believed that there were financial savings from introducing this scheme. Um, Men also underestimate how much women use buses. So the effect on what employment gains are there, what education gains are there, that's also sort of undervalued. And what we see and why this really matters is because, of course, several policymakers are male. Most of the bus staff, whether it's drivers, conductors, marshals, several of them are male. A lot of our family members, of course, are going to be male. And what we see is when men undervalue a scheme like this or do not understand its positive impacts, it sort of weakens the effect of the scheme, weakens the support for the scheme, right? So we
Right.
definitely, and it's not just perception, it's also behavior. It's in response to this, men are being hostile, men are, you know, not issuing tickets to women. So it's not just the perception of it, there's also a behavioral backlash. So there's definitely a messaging gap. We need to communicate that when these opportunities are unlocked for women, it's also about household resilience, it's also about economic participation, and families and economies benefit as a whole.
One thing that was brought up in the report is that one of the key limiting factors is safety for women, that they really perceive that to be a big issue while using buses, right? Is that, can you touch upon that finding a little bit?
Sure. So, what we saw sort of across the board is that less than 50% of women in all across all cities find the bus safe. There's a lot of challenges around hostility, a lot of challenges around harassment, around eve teasing, around touching, and this is both from male co-passengers as well as from bus staff. Sometimes the grievances and concerns are not met with the gravity that it needs. Um, and what we've seen is actually in cities that have a full subsidy, there is an increased notion that the buses are safer. So it does support this idea that increasing women's participation in public spaces does actually lead to safer outcomes. However, the subsidy alone is not going to meet that outcome, right? We need to ensure that we have the infrastructural support, whether it's CCTVs on buses, panic buttons, cameras, better lighting at bus stops. But that infrastructural piece is only sort of the first step. We need to ensure it's supplemented by ensuring that staff is trained better, um, that there's a entire messaging around this that supports your male co-passengers also understanding the impact of the scheme. There's grievance redressal in case anything goes wrong. So safety continues to be a challenge, but we are seeing that cities that have the subsidy are in a better place than cities that don't.
Okay. So my final question, really, thank you for this really insightful conversation. But if you had to sort of reiterate top three things that need to change or improve across cities so that subsidies or subsidies are more effective, or just travel for women, mobility for women improves?
Yeah. I think the subsidy is sort of the way we're viewing it is it that it's the first piece of the puzzle, and the remainder also needs to fall into place. If you're asking me to say top three, I think what I would say is number one, safety, of course, continues to be a concern. We need to enhance access, and we need to improve operational efficiency. So when it comes to safety, as I was saying, there's the infrastructural side, CCTVs, panic buttons, better lighting at bus stops, and the training side of it. So ensuring that bus drivers, conductors, marshals are all sensitized. They know how to deal when certain incidents arise, that there is a grievance redressal mechanism for anything that happens on the bus. This all feeds into the larger piece of safety, to supplement it not just from an infrastructural level, but also from a systemic level. Number two is operational efficiency. Um, we need to ensure that the buses are fleet sizes are improved. We need to ensure that routes are rationalized. We need to ensure that buses come with regularity so that it can support the complex mobility patterns of women. And number three, I would say, is access. So we need to ensure that first and last mile connectivity is improved. This could be through, feeder bus systems, ensuring walking paths are made a little bit, more efficient, fixing them, that there are integrated mobility patterns, making sure the bus feeds into the metro feeds back into the bus. So I would say I would bucket it across those three pillars, but something that needs to be sort of addressed across all these pillars is that ensuring women are not just viewed as beneficiaries, but they are part of the conversation, right? And this is at the policy level, whether it's the decision making level, this is at the implementation level. So when it comes to state and city transport authorities, as well as at the bus staff level, as marshals, as conductors, we need to ensure that women are included more in the dialogue so that our mobility decisions, our mobility priorities are included. And we're not just viewing women as needed, we're not just giving them a seat on the bus, but rather we're giving them a seat at the table that's making these decisions. And that's something that really needs to be thought through a little bit.